Welcome to the Analogue Wonderland channel. My name is Paul Mackay and I'm here with the Pentax 17 film camera. This is going to be a look back at everything I've learned about the Pentax 17, having used it for the last few weeks. We'll be showing you sample photos, we'll be showing you tips and tricks, everything to get you excited about the Pentax 17. Whether you are new to film photography or a long-time analog enthusiast, our channel covers all things film, from tips and tricks, film reviews to how-to videos. Subscribe now and keep those notifications turned on so that you never miss a beat. Happy shooting! The Pentax 17 is a modern 35mm film camera from the company that runs both the Pentax and the Ricoh brands. It is half frame. We'll come on to what that means in a bit more detail later, but it is beautiful and it is new, which is honestly just such a privilege for us film shooters. Now, of course, I know that there are people who make film cameras, Lomography being the top one, and just so we're clear, their LCA is my most used film camera over the last 10 years probably. But this does feel different, and that's because this is a premium construct. It's coming from the factories that make a lot of the modern Ricoh systems like the Ricoh GR. Pentax also has a huge heritage. In fact, I brought with me my little Pentax 110. So they have a wonderful heritage with making fantastic film cameras that goes back a century. When we talked to the team behind this, we were lucky enough to meet them in London a few weeks ago, and they were discussing how they've used sort of some of their heritage analog understanding, like the Pentax Espio lens system and some of the winding mechanisms of the Auto 110, mixed with the latest coating technologies and lens alignments and everything else that's obviously come on a huge amount in the last 20 or 30 years when analog camera innovation dropped. So this really is the combination of the best things about analog mechanical Pentax heritage and the recent innovations that are in imaging. This combines the two, and honestly, having used it for a few weeks, it's really, really good. We've actually got a video of my first sort of unboxing that will release probably a bit later. You'll be able to see me go through it. I think if I reflect now, the first thing that strikes you is just that it's so strange to be opening a proper camera box. Oh my gosh. It smells like it's come straight from the factory. That's such a new experience for those of us who are used to buying things sort of second hand if you're looking for a camera of this sort of build quality. And the second thing that is the most notable thing is the build quality, like the way that it opens, the way that you can see everything is made. I'm so used to picking things up and immediately checking sort of the seals around the edge and is there fungus, and of course there's no problems at all. The warranty I think is 2 years on this thing, so it's fresh from the factory and you know it's going to be reliable for a long time. Half frame, let's talk about that first, because obviously this is one of the most important things that people have picked up on before you've seen the camera, because Japan announced it I think 6 months ago that it would be half frame. Half frame, that means that the photos, 35mm landscape like that, cut in half, half frame. That also gives a clue as to the name, Pentax 17. 35mm frames are 36 by 24mm. 36 divide by 2, knock off a millimetre to give it a bit of space between the frames, 17mm. So the photos that you get on the negatives are 17mm by 24mm. I'm going to hold this up to the light so hopefully you can see it, and you can see that the frames that are coming through are half the size. And you'll also notice, of course, that they are portrait. As soon as you look through the viewfinder here, you can see it is portrait. So those are the first two important things to know. It's half the frame size and it's portrait orientation. Now the half the frame size also means twice as many photos on the same negative roll, which means half the cost because you're buying the film for the same price. And our lab, for example, doesn't charge extra for a half frame. I know some labs do, but for example, with our lab, it's literally halving the price of everything, which means you're getting twice as many photos for the same cost, which makes a huge difference. That's what I'm going to talk about with half frame. We do have separate videos if you want to get into a lot more detail around it, but that is the nuts and bolts of it for understanding this camera. So, you've got your new Pentax. It comes with a wrist strap. The wrist strap has a secret power that I will talk to you about shortly. You get the camera body, you get a little lens cap, and you get a CR2 battery that then fits into this little battery grip here. The battery powers the shutter, it also powers the exposure, the flash, and everything. Pentax say that the battery should last for at least 10 rolls of film, which is going to be 700 plus photos. So you'll have everything you need to start shooting this camera straight away. Now the things that I noticed was the feel it's light, it's about 300 grams, which is light enough to not notice actually when you're carrying around, but heavy enough to feel very sturdy. Everything feels really well made, as you might hope and expect. All the buttons, all the shutters click really satisfyingly into place. When you look at the top, there's quite a few settings that you can see. You can see that you set the ISO, it goes from 50 to 3200, which is fantastic. You know, you can see 50, 100, 200. There's also dots though for 125, like FP4, 160, so no excuse now not to shoot portrait 160, and obviously all the way up to 3200 for Delta and for T-Max. Gives you a fantastic range. There's exposure compensation dial as well if you want to over or underexpose a shot, because this camera has auto exposure. You won't be manually setting shutter and aperture. You'll be telling it what to do via the settings, which I'll come on to in a minute. There are ways that you can manipulate it a little bit. So this is not a point and shoot. You can put it in a mode that makes it as simple as that, but this allows for much greater creativity than you'd expect. Simple on-off button, and then a beautiful winding mechanism as well that feels very Pentax. The other thing that feels very Pentax is just the look of it. I mean, you can see the inspiration. When we speak to the Japanese team, they talk about, you know, having to bring some engineers back from retirement to help them. And you can see the influence. It's a really, really lovely bit of kit. On the bottom, there's a tripod thread. On the back, there's a little window to pop your film box to remind you what's in there. And you also have a little aux input for an electronic shutter release for bulb mode or for anything like that. A flash on the front, and the lens is zone focusing. There's some subtleties. It's actually electronic focusing, which might give us a clue as to what is coming in the future from Pentax. But it's not autofocus, so you set the focus yourself, and then when you half press the shutter, the lens will move into position. There is a filter thread, 40.5mm diameter, and wonderfully, the exposure meter is inside the lens diameter. So if you pop on an ultraviolet, if you pop on a polarizing or a color, the exposure will be read through that filter, which again is a really lovely touch. Now let's get into some of the experience of shooting. The settings are where you'll need to spend a little bit of time learning. Now frankly, when I first picked up this camera, I mean, I was blown away, as you'll see in that little video, but I did wonder whether it would truly become a sort of part of my everyday shooting. I was a little bit worried about this battery grip. It looked a little bit cumbersome, and I was a little bit concerned when I saw that the settings had things like bokeh mode, a moon, P. It also feels quite random when you're used to shutter speed, aperture. But having spent some time with it, I think you learn a couple of the codes of the camera, the settings, and then also there's some warning lights, and then actually you realise it has all the creative options you'll need. And it's so well thought through. It removes so many of those annoying little frustrations and errors that you have when shooting film cameras sometimes. You can't see that the lens cap's on, but the camera lights up warning lights. If you haven't wound it on, it won't let you press. It'll warn you if you're in macro mode and you're aiming it at a mountain. All these lovely little things that just help you take brilliant photos from the start, and the lens is obviously brilliant as well. So let's go through the settings. I'll talk to you about what the settings mean from a manual point of view, instructions, and then I'll tell you what they mean in real life. So let's start with auto, the blue mode. Now, this is the one that is the closest to point and shoot. What it does is it overrides the focus to effectively infinity, the aperture to small, I don't know the exact number, but it's probably about f16. And then auto does the shutter to allow for the right amount of light, turning the flash on if it thinks it needs it. So this is your, dare I say, had a couple of beers mode, perhaps. For me, who's obviously shot a lot of film over the years, I haven't really used it because it's too simple for me. The other modes are easy enough without needing that. But it's there if you want to shoot the first couple of things on. Now you then move to the white. So white settings are without flash, so there is no flash. Yellow means there is always flash. So the first choice to make is, do you want flash on or off? And again, for me, I'm so used to picking my camera, whether it has flash or not, that doesn't bother me. I'd much rather have manual control over that, especially because it's a built-in flash. So you've got to be very careful about red eye, about macro, things like that. P stands for program, and this is the one that I will use, you know, out and about shooting. So it sets a probably middle-ish aperture, somewhere between f8 and f16, and then it'll use the shutter speed to make sure that it captures the right amount of light for the film without blurring. So it probably won't go slower than 1/30 of a second to make sure you don't get any sort of hand blur. You'll have a really nice exposed, decent focal depth, pretty error-free shooting experience. Now you set the focus. There's symbols at the top. I can see those symbols when I look through the camera. They go from close to far. Flower, cutlery, one person, two people, three people, one of whom is a child, mountain. More helpful for me is at the bottom. When you move the dial, there's also two little lines that move that tell you it in meters and feet. So flower is 25 centimeters, 0.28 feet. Cutlery is half a meter, 1.7 feet. One person is 1.2 meter, two people is 1.7, three people is 3 meters, which is 4, 5.6 and 10 feet, and then a mountain is infinity. Again, this is one of those translating things you get very used to very quickly. So you focus, you have it on P, you know you're not going to need a flash, and it's going to work. You've obviously set the ISO when you come in. Moon mode. Now moon mode is effectively long exposure mode. So what it means is that the aperture will be set as small as possible and the shutter will be as long as it needs to be. Now that goes up to about 4 seconds. So on moon mode, if you're doing a long exposure, you want it to be on a table, you want it to be on a tripod, you want it to be something stable, because this will get motion blur. This is good for capturing cars whizzing past. Or if you're going to do a panning shot, that's going to be brilliant for this. So it's telling the camera you want lots of time, you want to capture a slow shutter, therefore you'll have a narrow aperture, which means lots will be in focus. So the other way of thinking about it is you're forcing the camera to maximize focal depth. Bokeh is the opposite. It forces a really large aperture, so down to f3.5, and then the shutter speed will be quite fast to compensate for that. But this is where you are minimizing the focal plane. You are getting beautiful subject separation. You're getting gorgeous bokeh in the background. And this is really useful for getting these gorgeous, gorgeous subject separated photos. Portraits are brilliant, macro is brilliant, anything like that. I wouldn't really recommend it with landscapes for obvious reasons. Landscapes you generally want as much in as possible. And that's really, really gorgeous. I spent a lot of time testing this, especially with the macro modes, 25 centimeters in particular, and getting some really nice like flower shots. And also you can see here with this photo of the snail, you can really understand how good this is. Now it's time for the reveal, the secret weapon of the wrist strap. Now when I first read this, I thought, oh, that's cool, bit gimmicky, but fine. I take that back, freaking invaluable. This, held right in front of the lens, is 25 centimeters from the film plane. Hold it tight, 25 centimeters. So when you're out and about, you see a beautiful flower, you see a bee, you want a perfect subject separation, put it to flower, change it to bokeh mode, hold this out, go right up, bing, 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 touch the flower, drop it, compose, take the photo. Perfectly in focus every time. Genius. Love it. B for bulb. Bulb turns off the auto exposure, sets a medium aperture, and then you just hold the shutter for as long as you want the photo to be taken. So this is astrophotography, this is light painting, this is a carousel at a Christmas market whizzing around and getting loads of gorgeous blur. Very specific, but I have a photo in my head of that, so it's there. Bulb mode, really, really useful, wonderful for creativity as well. It also means you can sort of create doubles as well, or ghosting if you're very quick, but I'll leave that for a separate tutorial. Say you want flash, you have two options. P for program. This is a sort of a normal flash. This acts a bit like a compact camera at this point. You just take the photo, it puts the flash, ding, lights up the subject, job done, shutter speed under 30th of a second, cracking. Most important things to think about the flash effectiveness. So the flash guide I think is 6. In reality what that means is ISO 400 film, it'll work up to sort of 2 to 3 meters. ISO 100 film, you need to be about a meter, maybe 2 meters away for it to be well exposed. That's one of the big reminders when you're like film, not digital. It can't just up the ISO for something that's further away with a flash on. Anything beyond 3 meters on the flash, unless you've got a 3200 film in, is not going to be really useful. Equally, if you have a 3200 film in and you're shooting at night, you don't want to be too close to the thin thing because it'll just overexpose it entirely. That's program mode. That's my party mode for me. That's 200 speed ISO film and shoot lots of people having a lovely time close by. And then the final mode is moonlight with flash. This isn't for taking photos of the moon, that would not work at all. This is for atmospheric party mode. So what this means is you will press the button and the flash will go off, but the camera will leave the shutter open to expose the background, sort of for natural light. It'll look at the scene before you press the flash and work out what it would do to take normally. So it might be 2 seconds to expose the full, but then it will fire the flash as well. So what you'll get is you'll get somebody close by, maybe lit by the flash, frozen in time, and then you'll get in the background, lovely, well exposed, but maybe slightly blurred background. Really lovely for sort of experimenting with. Pop it on a tripod and you won't get the motion blur, but you'll get a very different photo than if you use the program mode. For me, program mode without flash is my default street shooting mode, wandering about mode. As much as possible, that's the one I'll go with. If it's a party, I'll have program mode with flash on. If I'm being creative, then I'll go bokeh, I'll go bulb, I'll go moon, long shutter speed, and I can use those as I need. As I said, for that reason, I don't go back to auto. The other problem with auto is you can't use macro mode because it's set at infinity, effectively. The other couple of things to warn you with the flash is if you're any closer than ½ a meter, you're going to get side shadow because it's obviously not perfectly on the lens. You're going to get it. It is something just to be aware of when you're using it. So the lens is fantastic. You can see from the results that we're sort of cycling through as we go through just how sharp it can be from very close up to very far away, and also across the whole frame. It's a dual element lens. As I said, this is definitely, I think, where we see the benefit of all of Pentax's decades of experience, both in the analog region and then more recently in all the digital, because it just works so well. One of my team, when they first saw the camera with the lens cap on, thought that the lens was to be added on separately. They didn't realise that this was the lens, a little pancake lens. But it's so unobtrusive, again, it really helps. Like, I think I'd have worried more if it sort of stuck out there, but it allows you to capture everything really, really nicely. This is definitely an ideal street photographer's dream, both the lens and also everything else about it. The shutter makes a really interesting sound as well. It's very, very quiet, which is really nice. It sort of has a, rather than a click. And then the other really interesting thing is, I'll try and show you this to you. So this is where I sort of think about the feature a little bit. So because you set the focus and the camera does it. So as you half press, the lens moves into position. Now it happens, but it's almost instant. I've never missed the shot because of it, put it that way. And because it's zone focusing rather than auto, you don't get that annoying searching at any point. You want a photo, you press, it's done. It's so fast. Again, the modern electronics are just really, really impressive. So my top tips for using it really come down to measure twice, photograph once. So with zone focusing, just being really careful, especially in bokeh mode, you will reap the rewards. And also because it's half frame, there's less cost of getting it wrong. So you can shoot 2 photos for the price of 1. So use that to experiment, especially with photos that are something really beautiful. My second tip is obviously use the right film for the right light. It's a fantastic machine that will be able to do a lot of things, but it will not be able to make a grey, cloudy day look colourful. So don't shoot Ektar unless it's beautifully sunny, unless you like muted Ektar. Don't load a high-speed film and then try and take close-up flash photography. All of those things. I know this is more of a general comment than necessarily for this, but because this camera is so good, I think there's a risk that people might just load any film in it and think it'll be able to cope. It will be able to take photos, but it will not create the best photos. So don't forget that your first choice is the camera, but also the film that you're using. And third, enjoy it. It's light, it's compact, it's easy to use, it's super smart, it has auto exposure, it has enough settings to be creative if you wish, and cope with most films that we sell. Now I'm just going to quickly pause and address the number one thing that people say to me when I talk about half frame. They say, but the quality, you get half the frame, I want to be able to print. So this is a full-size print taken on the Pentax 17, scanned premium resolution, and on HP5, which by the way, it's a great film. It's not the sharpest film by any means, but that is absolutely perfect. See the little pigeon? So, keep going through. We'll go through a couple. I mean, this is probably one of my favourites, partly because it's obviously my bunny rabbit. Hello, lady. Full name Lady Jane Grey, royalty. you can see individual whiskers. If I get up my loop and I look through that, I can see, in fact I can see the whiskers behind the whiskers. So when you're thinking, oh, I keep hearing on the internet that half frame, you know, you lose detail, you know, you can't do anything big. If you're looking for something bigger than this, I agree. So if you're exhibiting A3, then absolutely you would want full frame or 120. If you're looking for bigger than A3 to exhibit, then yeah, that's fair enough. But of all the photos I've taken in my life, 8 have ended up printed in an exhibit. Now, of course, you might have a lot more than that. But for anything, oh, I mean, this is where you see the depth of field. I did this deliberately. I actually missed slightly. The snail is a centimetre too close. But you can see, this is bokeh mode, and with my zone focusing, and you can see how narrow the focal plane is. It's beautiful. If only I'd got that right. Maybe the next one. But you can see the detail in all the dirt and things. So if you're looking for your photos to go on social media, on a website, in a portfolio, if you're printing it for clients, you know, this is absolutely lossless at this stage. When you're zooming in, there is no loss of detail, even, as I say, with a little loop. So there we go. I just wanted to visualize it in this way because you can see it when you sort of zoom in on a digital file, etc. But if you think half frame, just think of this image. If you're printing it bigger than this, you might be concerned. But for every other use, half frame is absolutely sufficient, especially with the range of 35mm films available. As I say, this is HP5. If I took it to Delta 100 or T-Max 100, Kodak claim finest grain in black and white, T-Max 100 or ADOT's HR50, and you'd be able to scan it up to the wall without even noticing. It's been so many years since a global camera manufacturer of the scale of Pentax, Ricoh, have created something like this. It really is one to just enjoy and make the most of, and I promise you, as I say, the photos you get back will be really mind-blowing. So, you've heard me talk a little bit about it now. You've seen, hopefully, a lot of the photos that have come through. I want to just give you sort of a few of my favourite things, and then a few things that I'd probably put on a wish list, maybe for Pentax 17 Mark II. And then we'll talk a little bit around what Pentax are hopefully doing in the future. My favourite things, I mean, number one, the experience of using it is just much, much better than I feared. I say feared, I was not because of anything Pentax said, but just because this is such a once in a generational moment. I was worried that it wouldn't live up to expectations, or it would become a camera that I liked for what it represented but didn't use. That's not true. I am using this camera every day, and long after it is an established part of the film photographer's world, I'll still be using it. That's definitely true. The experience is so good. As soon as you realised what the settings mean, okay, that's long exposure, okay, that's, you know, big aperture, then you just find yourself clicking into it, and the ability to play with exposure and those settings and being so specific on the zone focus allows you to be really creative as well. So I'm not seeing me stopping using this camera anytime soon. The other thing that I really love is the warning lights. For example, you turn the camera on, you look through the viewfinder. Oh, great photo. Hi Amy. Hi camera. This looks amazing. I'll take a photo. Wait a minute. It's flashing at me, and what's it telling me? It's telling me that the lens cap is still on. Brilliant. Okay, I'll take the photo. Yay! Now, oh, I'm gonna do another one, but maybe upside down. Oh, hang on, what's happening now? It's flashing. And it's now telling me I haven't wound it on. There we go. If I have it in macro mode, it flashes very gently, calmly, just to let me know, hey, you know it's in macro mode, right? Yes, I do, camera. I didn't realise immediately what those lights meant. It was a bit overwhelming, but again, there's only 5 or 6 things that the blue and the orange can do. Orange is the flash one, so it lets you know when it's charging and then when it's charged, when you've got it in any of the yellow modes. The blue one is the warning light, and it basically blinks fast or slow. As soon as you know the language it's talking, it just becomes part of the sort of information that you're absorbing as a photographer, looking at the scene, the framing, everything. It's just letting you know. And as I say, it's not always trying to stop you from doing things. You can still shoot with a lens cap off, it'll just try and stop you from doing it. You can still shoot in the dark and it'll do the same thing. There's not any light in here, but you can still do it. You can still shoot macro mode at a mountain. It'll politely encourage you not to. But because you can see it when it's close up, it's just there in the corner of your eye, it's just adding information instantaneously into a shooting experience. So many of the things that you sort of might make a mistake on won't happen. Now, of course, you can still screw up the focus. You can still have the wrong film in and spend the whole day shooting beautiful flowers in colour when actually you've got HP5. You can still do mistakes, don't get me wrong, but most of the common ones will be avoidable without you even really having to think about it, which is a really, really lovely touch. And finally, I love the results, honestly. You know, I've been deliberately shooting sample photos, so testing things specifically, you know, boring photos of a range of pebbles and things like that, not really expressing myself artistically, but even amongst that, there's been some photos that I really, really love. When I go out and about shooting this in my daily life, without worrying about content or testing it, this is going to produce some of my favourite photos of the year. I'm going to call it now. Come back in 6 months and let's see if I'm right. But the results really, really are truly special. And that obviously is what makes the camera. So you sort of think, it's simplistic, I know, but you sort of judge the camera based on the experience and the lens based on the results. This is 2 big ticks. And things like the warning lights and all the modern tech is just absolutely icing on the cake. Now, it's not perfect. Sorry, Pentax. Of course, it's not perfect. I have my wish list, you may have your own. The thing that's most galling for me is that it doesn't have a beautiful carry case. I know that's not really the camera, it's sort of accessories, but I would love, like, I mean, my Olympus OM, one of my favourites, sort of the metal with the leather overlay that sort of holds it safe. And it's not really for day-to-day use, because I say this is just in my hand or in my pocket with the lens cap on, and it's fine. It's well enough made that it's not going to get bashed about. But it's more for like popping it in a backpack or a rucksack for travel, for a weekend travel. I want a bit more protection to stop it bouncing around. Whereas at the moment I'd probably put it in my Santa Fe camera bag to go in a bag, which isn't ideal. Okay, so I'd love a case. I'd love a hot shoe to be able to mount an external flash. Inbuilt flash is brilliant. Obviously it makes it a really compact all-in-one package, but to shoot any really good photos with flash, you want it to be mounted externally, angled or remote. That will definitely be on my wish list. Maybe this is the lomographer in me, but I'd love multiple exposure mode. It's just who I am. Something that can just quickly flip a switch and you override that part of the camera that says you cannot press the button if you've already taken a photo. Or even if that warning was an optional warning rather than a stopping you warning, that would be really nice. And then finally, I must admit that I find the framing in the viewfinder a little difficult. Like, there are times when it looks perfect, it's very easy, but in real life when you're moving about, you move your head slightly and the lines disappear. And although it's brilliant that the camera shows you more than is in the photo, so that you can see when things are coming, you can pose, I find that I ended up cropping too much in camera, so I'm now forcing myself to sort of frame, take a step back and allow for a bit of error so I can then crop afterwards, which is not ideal. That might be user error. You tell me whether you think that's poor, just being rubbish at taking photos. But I mean, in terms of everything else, everything major, they've absolutely nailed it. Now, of course, the Pentax film project hopefully encompasses more than just this camera. And there are a couple of clues within this camera that I think might tell us where they're going. As I said, we've been in lots of talks with Pentax over the last year in the build up to this launch. Sadly, they haven't let me in on all their secrets of what they're planning. But I'm going to show a couple of things and I hope that they don't tell me off for being so open. If you look at the back, they could have made this camera smaller. This looks to me like the body of a full frame camera with masks to make it half frame. I'm not a camera designer, but there is enough space in there. If you look at some other custom made half frame cameras, there's no space to make it full frame. This looks like there is space to make it full frame. So hopefully full frame is on the cards. The other thing is the fact that the focus is electronic rather than manual means that this camera is one sensor away, the autofocus sensor away, from being autofocus as well. Now personally, I'd like that to be a optional thing, like a switch on or off for autofocus, because I've had too much experience with cameras that mess up the autofocus or only do it centrally, or, you know, in dark they spend the whole time searching. Ugh. So I want to be able to have it on or off depending on the situation, but I'd love that as well, because to be able to not worry about it too much, not have to do as much measuring would be really, really nice if I wanted it. But hopefully this is the start of a journey. And I think when I saw the reactions to them first saying, yes, it's half frame, a lot of people were like, okay, great, I'll support it for that, but really, where's the full frame? I do want to say, this is a really good camera by itself. There we go. So we have stock incoming. If you like the look of this, then place a pre-order. We will only be accepting pre-orders for the stock that we know is coming. So we're not just going to blindly accept loads of pre-orders and then leave it months. So it might be that pre-order says out of stock when you go there. That means that we've already sold the ones we know we're getting. But sign up for notifications and we'll open it again with dates as soon as we have it. What we understand is that the global supply is going to be tight but good, i.e. there will be constant waves just coming in of small amounts. So get yourself in the queue as soon as possible if you like the look of this, and we'll get it shipped out to you. We're going to ship film with it as well as a little thank you for being part of this Pentax film project journey. And that's going on from now. There's also going to be loads more content to come. So on our social media and on YouTube, we've shot a lot of films with this, black and white color. We've put it through its paces really on every mode as well. So there will be then specific blogs, posts and things coming out that'll help you sort of be inspired and educated on all the amazing things that this camera can do. So please keep following along. Any questions, let us know, and I'll see you soon.